In the hushed intensity of the private ICU at New York Presbyterian Hospital Malachi, Reynolds adjusted the four-line with steady hands while Julian Harrington struggled to draw another breath. The billionaire's once commanding presence was reduced to a frail figure against the white sheets, but his eyes still held a spark that refused to extinguish as he looked up at the nurse who had become his constant companion through the long nights. Malachi had seen many patients come and go in his 8 years as a registered nurse, but none had affected him quite like Julian. At 32, Malachi was used to the sideways glances and whispered comments about his sexuality in the hospital corridors. He was the gay nurse who brought an extra level of compassion, or so they said, often with a tone that diminished his skills. Yet here with Julian, those labels felt even heavier. The man before him was not just another patient. He was a titan of finance whose empire spanned continents, and whose name commanded respect in boardrooms worldwide. Julian had been diagnosed with an aggressive form of pancreatic cancer 6 months ago, and despite the best treatments, his condition had deteriorated rapidly. Malachi was assigned as his primary nurse because of his reputation for patience and empathy in end-of-life care. From the first day, Julian had tested him with sharp comments and probing questions. "Why do you do this job when you could be doing something more lucrative, Malachi?" The question had caught him off guard, but he answered honestly. "Because I believe every person deserves dignity in their most vulnerable moments." That response seemed to soften something in Julian. Over the next weeks, their conversations deepened. Julian spoke of building his company from a small startup in Silicon Valley to a global powerhouse in renewable energy and tech. But the success came at a cost. He had sacrificed personal happiness, keeping his sexuality hidden for years, fearing it would destroy investor confidence. Malachi in turn shared his own journey, growing up in a conservative town in Ohio, where his coming out at 19 had led to family estrangement. He moved to New York seeking acceptance, but found that even in the big city, the prejudice lingered in subtle ways. One night as Malachi checked his vitals, Julian grabbed his hand weakly. "You remind me of the man I could have been if I had your courage." The words lingered in the air, filling Malachi with a mix of warmth and confusion. Was this just the medication or something more? The hospital staff noticed the close bond, and the whispers started. Some colleagues joked about the gay nurse cozying up to the rich patient. Others gave him pitying looks, assuming he was seeking a sugar daddy. Malachi ignored them, focusing on his duty, but inside it stung. He knew his feelings for Julian were growing beyond professional, but he pushed them down. Julian was dying, and he was his nurse. That night, after a particularly bad episode where Julian had a pain spike, Malachi stayed late, holding his hand through the ordeal. When it passed, Julian whispered, "Thank you for seeing me, not the billionaire, not the dying man, just me." Malachi felt his heart twist. For the first time, he felt truly seen, too. As the shift ended, he left the room with a heavy heart, wondering what the coming days would bring for them both. The next morning, Julian seemed a bit stronger and asked Malachi to read from a book of poetry he kept by the bed. The verses spoke of hidden truths and quiet strengths, and as Malachi read, his voice steady, Julian watched him with an intensity that made the room feel smaller. Later that afternoon, Julian's sister Victoria arrived in a tailored suit, her perfume sharp and her eyes colder than the hospital air. She barely acknowledged Malachi, calling him to help as she leaned over her brother, demanding updates on the company. Julian waved her off, but the look she shot Malachi made it clear she saw him as nothing more than an inconvenience. Malachi stepped out to give him privacy, but he could hear her raised voice questioning why a stranger was spending so much time with her brother. When Victoria left, Julian sighed deeply. She has always seen the world in columns, and rose never in hearts, Malachi. Do not let her dim your light. Those words stayed with Malachi through his drive home to his small apartment in Queens, where he called his best friend Alex, a fellow nurse. Alex listened patiently as Malachi poured out the confusion, the budding affection, and the fear of crossing lines. "You deserve to be seen for who you are, not what people label you," Alex said. "Just be careful." Malachi nodded, even though Alex could not see him. The days blurred into a rhythm of care and connection. Julian shared stories of boardroom battles and quiet regrets about never building a family of choice. Malachi listened, offering small comforts like adjusting pillows or bringing fresh flowers from the hospital garden. One evening, as the sun set, painting the room in soft oranges, Julian asked Malachi to sit longer than his shift required. They talked about dreams, Julian admitting he wished he had lived more openly, and Malachi confessing his hope to one day open a clinic for underserved communities. The conversation felt like a bridge forming between two worlds, and when Malachi finally stood to leave, Julian held his gaze a moment longer than necessary. "Thank you for making these days bearable." Malachi smiled softly, walking out with a lightness he had not felt in years. Yet deep down he knew the road ahead held storms he could not yet see. The following weeks brought a deeper rhythm to their days as Julian's health stabilized enough for short walks in the hospital garden. Malachi pushed the wheelchair with care, pointing out blooming flowers while Julian shared more of his past. "I built an empire, but I lost myself along the way," he said one afternoon, his voice carrying the weight of years. Malachi nodded, understanding the cost of hiding who you are. His own family back in Ohio still sent occasional messages laced with conditional love but never full acceptance. Julian noticed the distant look in Malachi's eyes and gently probed until Malachi opened up about the Thanksgiving when his father had asked him to leave the table after he brought home his first boyfriend. The memory still ached, but sharing it with Julian felt safe. In turn, Julian revealed he had come close to love once with a man in his 30s, but the pressure of public life had ended it. "I was a coward," he admitted. "Now looking back, I see what I missed." Their talks stretched into evenings, with Malachi staying past shift change to watch old movies on Julian's tablet. Laughter came easier, and with it a warmth that neither named yet. Victoria visited again, this time with her husband in tow, both eyeing Malachi like an intruder. She cornered him in the hallway, demanding to know what he was really after. "My brother is vulnerable, and you're taking advantage," she hissed. Malachi kept his voice even. "I am here to care for him as his nurse." She scoffed, walking away, but the seed of doubt planted itself in Malachi's mind. Was he crossing a line? That night, Julian sensed the tension and asked what happened. Malachi told him honestly, and Julian's face hardened. "My sister sees dollar signs, not people. You are more to me than any title, Malachi." The words hung between them, heavy with unspoken meaning. The next day, Julian felt stronger, and they sat on the garden bench under bright sunlight. Julian reached for Malachi's hand. "I see the man who laughs at my bad jokes, the one who stays when others leave." Malachi's heart raced, but he squeezed back gently. "You see me too." The moment passed, but the connection deepened. Alex warned him over coffee in the cafeteria to guard his heart, but Malachi could not deny the pull. Julian began to improve slightly enough for private talks about the future. He hinted at changes he wanted in his company, emphasizing ethical practices and support for health initiatives. Malachi listened, inspired by the vision. One quiet evening, Julian read a poem about finding light in darkness, and as he finished, he looked at Malachi with eyes full of quiet promise. "You are that light for me." Malachi felt tears prick but smiled through them. The bond grew stronger each day, yet the outside world pressed in with staff gossip and Victoria's calls to the hospital administration questioning Malachi's involvement. He faced a meeting with his supervisor, who warned him about boundaries. Malachi defended his professionalism but left feeling exposed. Back with Julian, he found solace in their shared silences and growing trust. Julian's laughter at Malachi's stories of nursing mishaps filled the room. For the first time in years, Julian spoke of wanting more time. "I want to see what we could build together," he said softly one night. Malachi did not pull away. The days turned into a tapestry of care and quiet affection, building a foundation neither had expected. Yet shadows loomed, with Julian's health fluctuating and family pressure mounting. Malachi wondered if their connection could survive the storm ahead. As Julian's condition fluctuated, the emotional stakes rose. One morning, a health scare sent alarms blaring, and Malachi sprang into action, coordinating with doctors while holding Julian's hand through the panic. When the crisis passed, Julian looked at him with raw gratitude. "You saved more than my body today." The words unlocked something, and in the quiet aftermath, Julian confessed, "I have fallen for you, Malachi, the way you care, the way you challenge me." Malachi's breath caught. "I feel the same, but this is complicated." Julian smiled weakly. "Life is complicated, but this feels right." They agreed to move slowly, honoring the reality of his illness. Victoria learned of the closeness through hospital rumors and arrived furious, confronting Malachi in the hallway. "You are nothing but a gold-digging game nurse trying to worm your way into my brother's fortune." Her words cut deep, echoing every doubt Malachi had carried. He stood tall. "I care for Julian as a person, not his money." Julian overheard and called his sister into the room, demanding she apologize. She refused, storming out, but the damage lingered. Malachi spent the night questioning everything, but Julian's steady presence reassured him. You are worthy of love exactly as you are. Their bond strengthened through the conflict, with tender moments like Julian sharing childhood stories and Malachi opening about his dreams for a better world. Julian began consulting lawyers in secret, hinting to Malachi about securing a legacy that honored heart over profit. Family pressure mounted, with Victoria rallying distant relatives, painting Malachi as a threat. The media caught wind of the billionaire's close nurse, sparking early headlines. Malachi faced stares at work and a call from his mother in Ohio, who had seen rumors online. Is this true? She asked, her voice tense. He explained honestly, but her hesitation hurt. Alex offered support, reminding him of his strength. The days brought more shared vulnerabilities, Julian admitting fears of leaving without making amends, and Malachi revealing his fear of being defined by one label. Their love grew in these honest exchanges, a quiet force against the rising tide. Julian's health held steady enough for short outings in the hospital grounds, where they spoke of possible futures if time allowed. The confrontation with Victoria escalated when she brought legal papers questioning Julian's capacity, but he dismissed them, firmly standing by Malachi. This is my choice, he declared. Malachi felt empowered, yet the weight of prejudice pressed on. Nights brought deeper talks about identity and belonging, with Julian encouraging Malachi to see his value beyond nursing. You have the heart to lead far bigger things. The seed of change planted itself in Malachi. As the file of challenges grew, their commitment to each other solidified, turning friendship into something profound and life-affirming. The world outside prepared its judgment, but inside the hospital room a new chapter unfolded, full of hope amid uncertainty. Recovery brought moments of joy as Julian regained some strength, allowing longer conversations and plans. They spent afternoons in the sunlit lounge, where Julian read business books to Malachi, explaining strategies with passion. Malachi absorbed it all, inspired by the man behind the empire. Their affection showed in small gestures, a lingering touch, a shared smile. Julian spoke of wanting Malachi by his side beyond the hospital. I see a future where you help shape the company with compassion. Malachi hesitated, but the idea took root. Family opposition intensified, with Victoria filing complaints and leaking stories to the press. Headlines appeared calling Malachi the gay nurse with questionable motives. He faced a barrage of questions from reporters outside the hospital and internal hospital scrutiny. Alex stood by him, providing backup during shifts. Julian defended him, publicly telling visitors the truth of their connection. One evening under soft lights, Julian took Malachi's hands. I love you not despite who you are, but because of it. Malachi returned the words, his heart full. The declaration marked a turning point, strengthening their resolve. Julian's health allowed a brief discharge to his penthouse, where Malachi continued care. There, in the luxurious space, their bond deepened, with evenings on the balcony overlooking the city. Julian shared regrets about past choices, and Malachi helped him draft notes for the company, emphasizing inclusion. Victoria visited the penthouse unannounced, accusing Malachi of manipulation in front of Julian. The argument grew heated, but Julian sent her away with a final warning. This is my life and my heart. Malachi felt the sting, but Julian's support helped him process it. They celebrated small victories, like Julian walking unaided and planning a foundation for LGBT health. Malachi's family reached out, mixed with concern and curiosity, but he focused on the present. The media storm grew, but in private their love provided shelter. Julian secretly met with lawyers, finalizing arrangements, while Malachi supported without knowing the full scope. The days filled with laughter and meaningful work, planning how to use wealth for good. Malachi grew in confidence, seeing himself through Julian's eyes as capable and worthy. Challenges tested them, but each hurdle brought closer connection and mutual growth. The foundation of their relationship proved resilient against external forces, setting the stage for greater trials ahead. In the penthouse, the final weeks unfolded with profound intimacy. Julian's health declined again, but their emotional closeness intensified. They shared promises of legacy and love, sitting by the fireplace where Julian expressed his desire for Malachi to carry forward his vision. Malachi listened, absorbing the responsibility. On a clear night, Julian's voice weakened, but his words clear. You have shown me true love, Malachi. I want the world to know it through what we build. Malachi held him close, fighting tears. Their days involved quiet reflections, Julian dictating letters to allies and Malachi helping organize them. Victoria and her allies increased pressure with legal threats, but Julian remained firm. A health crisis hit hard, and Malachi stayed by his side through the night, talking of memories and hopes. Julian rallied briefly enough for a tender evening where they acknowledged their love fully. The bond felt eternal, despite the prognosis. Julian passed peacefully one morning with Malachi, holding his hand, whispering final words of gratitude. Grief washed over Malachi, but he honored Julian's wishes, arranging the funeral. At the service, Victoria publicly sidelined him, but close friends and allies recognized his role. Malachi stood strong, drawing on their shared strength. The will reading loomed, and Malachi prepared for whatever came. Julian's letters left for him provided guidance and encouragement, fueling his resolve. The transition from nurse to potential heir began in his heart as he reflected on the journey from dismissed caregiver to beloved partner. The world watched as rumors swirled, but Malachi focused on honoring the man who had seen his true worth. The will reading in the sleek Manhattan law office sent immediate shockwaves. Lawyers read Julian's words, leaving the majority controlling interest in his company and substantial assets to Malachi with a mandate to lead with compassion and fund equality initiatives. Gasps filled the room as Victoria and other family members erupted in outrage. "This is impossible," she screamed, claiming undue influence. Malachi sat stunned, but the documents were ironclad with witnesses and Julian's clear intent. News leaked instantly, headlines blaring, "Gay nurse inherits billionaire fortune." The financial world reacted with stock plunges and emergency board meetings. Malachi faced a media frenzy outside the office, cameras flashing as reporters shouted questions. He retreated to the penthouse, processing the enormity. Julian's letters explained a choice. "You are the heart I lacked. Led as I could not." Malachi felt the weight, but also the honor. Victoria filed lawsuits immediately, alleging manipulation, and the board called an emergency session questioning his fitness. Allies from Julian's inner circle reached out, offering support, one executive sharing how Julian had spoken of Malachi's integrity. Malachi began studying the company materials Julian had prepared, feeling the growth begin. The accusations flew, but he stood by the truth of their love and Julian's wishes. The chaos tested every part of him, but the internal voice Julian had nurtured urged him forward. Lawsuits and board battles consumed the following months. Malachi attended meetings facing skeptical executives who saw only the label of gay nurse. Victoria's team spread rumors and pressured shareholders. Malachi experienced betrayal when a former colleague sold stories to the press, but support came from unexpected places, including Julian's old friends and even some family members moved by the letters. Malachi's crisis deepened as doubts resurfaced. Am I worthy? He visited Julian's grave, finding clarity in the quiet. With help from trusted advisors, he learned the business, immersing himself in decisions that aligned with Julian's vision, like expanding healthcare programs. Court hearings brought tense confrontations where Malachi testified about their genuine connection. The media portrayed him variably as opportunist or hero, but he focused on results. Internal growth happened through late nights studying and reflecting on choices. He decided to fight not for money, but for the legacy of love and change. Allies rallied, and a key shareholder meeting approached where he would speak. The pressure peaked with Victoria's final push, but Malachi's resolve held, forged in the fire of prejudice and loss. The annual shareholder meeting in the Grand Wall Street Auditorium marked the climax. Malachi stood at the podium, facing a sea of faces, some hostile, some curious. With steady voice, he spoke of Julian's true wishes, the man who saw beyond labels to the heart. He detailed plans for ethical growth and community support, sharing how Julian's love had transformed him from doubting nurse to committed leader. The room shifted as he addressed the prejudices head-on. "We are more than the boxes society puts us in." Applause built, and even some opponents nodded. Victoria's challenges faded as votes affirmed his position. In the aftermath, Malachi stabilized the company, launching initiatives honoring Julian. He reconciled partially with his family and built new chosen family with allies. The journey complete, he stood on the balcony where he and Julian had connected, reflecting on the growth from seen as just the gay nurse to respected visionary. The financial world settled, recognizing the positive shift. Malachi continued the work with quiet strength, knowing the real victory was in the love that redefined everything. True or false, genuine connection can overcome societal labels and prejudices to create lasting change.